Hi everyone, this is Dr. Thornburg-Suresh, or you can call me Dr. TS, and today I'm going to be presenting our very first lecture for Biology 100, which is about what is life. So why do we even need to define life in a biology class? Well, that is because biology is the study of life and living organisms. So biologists study life and living organisms. And so in order to actually understand what that means, we need to define what it means to be alive. I additionally would like to define organism. So anytime we use the word organism in class, and this is going to be a word that you use in this class and classes beyond, an organism is simply defined as any individual living system. So this could be a small little bacteria, or you yourself are a living organism. And so one of the core questions of biology is, how do we distinguish a living organism from a non-living object? And so you'll see on this slide that we have an image of three different things. We have a rock, a cat, and a virus. And one of these things is considered a living organism, and the other two are not. So I want you to take a second and think about which one of these organisms is alive. Hopefully, you came up with the cat. Now I also want you to start kind of brainstorming what makes a cat alive, what makes you alive, and what makes a rock not alive. And so when biologists have asked this question over time, they've kind of come up with 8 properties that if an organism meets these 8 properties, we consider it alive. And so we're going to go through each of these 8 properties, as they are something that we are going to come back to over and over again in this course, and talk about how that contributes to a living organism. The first of these 8 properties is order, or cellular organization. This is the idea that organisms are highly organized structures that can consist of one or more cells. So we have here a bacterial cell. So bacteria are single-celled living organisms. They just made up of one cell, but they are still organized and structured. We also have an image of a cute little dog. Dogs are multicellular organisms made up in lots of different types of cells that all work together in an organized, consistent manner. And so although we can have single-celled and multicellular organisms, they all are highly structured and highly organized. The second property is that living organisms transform energy to perform work. So we have to be able to get energy from somewhere. So for us, that's by eating food. We eat food, and then our cells have to be able to turn that into something usable in order to do things like run on a treadmill or to listen to a lecture. And so later in the semester, you'll actually learn how cells take food and turn it into energy. And all living organisms are capable of this. Some get their energy from the sun, some get their energy from food, but all of them are working to transform that energy into something that the cells can use and the organisms can use to do work. The third property is the ability to sense and respond to various different stimuli. So stimuli is just think of anything in your environment. And so in this example, if you put your hand over a fire, that's not going to feel great. It's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. You are detecting, you are sensitive to that stimuli, and you are going to respond to it. So you're going to pull your hand away. All living organisms can detect and respond to different stimuli. The fourth property is that living organisms have the ability to regulate their internal systems. So I want you to think about what happens when you go outside on a hot day. Let's say it's 106 degrees, a hot August, Kansas temperature, maybe a little humid. What are you going to do? Your body's probably going to sweat. You're probably going to be thirsty. You'll probably feel the urge to, wear less clothing, right? And all of that is because your body is sending signals trying to regulate your internal temperature. So for example, humans, we like to stay right around 98 degrees Fahrenheit. And so in order to maintain that internal temperature, our body has to do different things. We call this homeostasis. Homeostasis is the relatively stable internal environment required to maintain life. And this is a word that you are going to hear all the time. You're going to hear it all the time in this class and in your future classes, as this is an essential concept in biology, that we have specific parameters that our body has to stay in, and we use all of our body and organ systems in order to maintain that homeostasis. So for example, you go out on a hot day, you want to keep your body at 98 degrees Fahrenheit, so your body is going to produce sweat to cool your body down. The next property is reproduction. All living organisms produce offspring. This can either be through sexual reproduction, where two distinct organisms or parents come together and make a new one, or this can be asexually, where a living organism splits itself or does other cool forms of reproduction to make offspring. But all living organisms are capable of producing offspring. And we'll learn more about sexual versus asexual reproduction later in the course. Next is heredity. So during that process of reproduction, the organism is passing on its genetic material or information to that offspring. And that genetic information is going to then influence what the offspring looks like. So for example, if you have a parent with blue eyes, you might be passed on that genetic information to also have blue eyes. The next property is growth and development. So all organisms are capable of growing and developing over time. So typically, most organisms, after they have been born, either through sexual or asexual reproduction, start out as kind of small versions of themselves. And then they're going to grow and change over time based on different things like genetic information. So in this example, a baby calf is much smaller, has different properties than a full-grown cow. And so over time, you'll see that calf grow and develop into that kind of full-grown cow. The final property of life is the ability to adapt through evolution. So over many generations, populations of organisms are able to evolve and change to adapt for their environment. So for example, millions and millions of years ago, there was a bird, and some of those birds maybe moved to land where they had to start feeding on local mammal populations. And then you had some of those birds move to the sea where they had to start feeding on fish. And so in order to get better at doing those things, whether that was eating a rabbit or a fish, the bird evolved. So for example, we have the eagle, which evolved to eat things like mammals. So it has kind of like a hooked beak that allows it to more easily catch and eat the rabbit. On the other hand, you have something like a pelican, which has kind of a wider beak where it can go into the ocean and scoop up the fish and eat it that way. And so while both of these organisms kind of started out, millions and millions of years ago, and evolutionary history is the same, they evolved and changed to adapt to the different environments that they lived in. All of these properties of living things are going to feed into what we call the hierarchy of living things. And so this hierarchy is literally just the building blocks of an organism. And so in this course, we are going to get through this much of the hierarchy. So we will start by talking about things like subatomic particles, atoms, and molecules, the basic chemistry that makes life up. So this will kind of be our first unit. And then we'll start talking more about macromolecules, organelles, cells, and tissues. And then finally, we'll kind of end the class by talking about things like organs and organ systems. And so throughout the course, we'll be learning about pieces of this hierarchy. We're going to start with the very, very basics of what makes an organism alive and work our way all the way up through to the organismal level. So that's it. Thank you, guys.